Greetings! It's this time of the year again when everyone makes their top lists, and we are no different. Today we're going to look at the top 200 solo games as voted by the People's Choice community on BGG. There have been other people who have looked at this list and commented on their preferences that they would have liked to have seen, or just games that they are missing, and there are more creators who have commented on their comments. So to keep the meta flowing, we are going to do the same. However, there's going to be a little twist. Viewers of story tiles know I like thematic games. Gameplay and strategy are nice, but characters, locations, and events, and the story, that's what really gets me juiced up. Furthermore, games have to be journey focused. Not focused on the win or on victory points, but on the discovery and exploration during the game. And finally, for this list to happen, solo has to be more fun. If a game is primarily a group social game, that's fine, but when you play it solo and it really shines, then it has a place on this list. We'll call this the Cut Edition, Culled unless Thematic. One more note to keep in mind. This list, like every other list, is highly subjective. If you compared this list to the thematic list on BGG, for example, you would see that many games are not even represented, even though the majority of gamers have found these games to be more thematic than others. So keep that in mind. So let's first look at solo. What appeals to most players playing this way? Well, it depends on if you play for the win or for the challenge, or if you play for the immersion and the journey while playing solo. Thunderworks Games has brought out a duo of really excellent solo experiences. Cartographer's A Role Player Tale is a roll and write, which is not too complex and actually takes you on a really nice journey, as opposed to Hadrian's Wall and Legacy of You, which I personally find too complex. Likewise, Role Player Adventures is a sequel to Role Player, where you go off on a very Dungeons & Dragons-like adventure with various modules, and it feels really immersive, but it is definitely enjoyed best with one or two players. Now, if you're seeking a true overland adventuring experience, and you heard of Runebound, forget Runebound, and go for the Isofarian Guard, for instance. It's a newcomer on the block and does this so well with its visuals, its audio narration, and luxurious components. And still better yet is Explore It. Volumes 1 through 4 have now come to the market, and there are campaign books that are now being added to it to truly give you a long story campaign to go with your overland adventuring. And if you're looking for a little bit less narration and story, but you just want to explore, try Seventh Continent. With Seventh Citadel on the horizon, this still excels at wandering around a landscape, crafting new items, trying to survive. And if it's too complex, you can always try the excellent series Carta Ventura, which will be a good entry level for you and your friends. Now, if you're really looking to up your game and leave the points behind and enjoy the journey, then these next few games would be my recommendations. To start off, there are a lot of pandemic games on this list, but the really great pandemic games are the legacy games, specifically Season 1 and Season 2. These really let you enjoy the fall forward mechanic in a campaign where the stories just keep on building no matter if you win or lose. And speaking of games that may be very thematic, but still focus very much on the win, Come On has Massive Darkness, Cthulhu Death May Die, and Bloodborne the board game, which are really excellent immersive games, but they're one-offs and they really focus on if you can win or not. So I would recommend their cousins, Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition, or Legends with its 3D terrain, and Arkham Horror. Madara would also be an excellent alternative if you want to explore more story, or Sleeping Gods 1 or 2 if you want to focus more on the overland adventuring again. And if you want to try something a little bit more on the heavier side, maybe the much heavier side, Aeon Trespass Odyssey gives you a very epic campaign of exploration and boss battling. Being the spiritual successor to Kingdom Death Monster, I also actually find the theme more appealing and more accessible. But if you want something really light, on the other hand, Lands of Galzier will give you tons of exploration and overland travel with fuzzy little animals. One might even say that this is a spiritual cousin of Root, which is a more mechanical combat-driven game instead. Back to something really much more complex and campaign-driven is Tanaris Adventures. Here, Arena the Contest is its predecessor, but Tanaris is really where the world building shines, and it's an excellent dungeon crawler in my opinion. And talking about excellent dungeon crawlers, now we enter the Awaken realms with Ether Fields, possibly the best dungeon crawler, or actually dream crawler, that one can imagine. Becoming engrossed with the journey all by yourself is fun, but imagine when it's totally thematic, when the characters shine, the locations are evocative, and the events are intriguing. Awaken Realms continues to amaze us with wonders like Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, where you go on Arthurian quests in a warped land, or battle aliens in the darkness of space. There are other games with similar themes, but they are either too complex or they're just not evocative enough on the table. But Awaken Realms is not infallible, where ISS Vanguard feels a little too spreadsheety and work-like. Core Space, however, is just pure fun, fast movements, in and out of space stations looting the place before the Horde takes over. And if you want to stay out of space, and maybe perhaps go exploring in the deep darkest jungles, then I could recommend Oathsworn Into the Deepwood for a truly thematic experience, perhaps more so than Lost Ruins of Arnak, which still to my taste feels a little too gamey. Similarly, if you want to explore the island life, avoid Spirit Island, which may be a little too abstract on the table, and dive deep into Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island. You may die, but you'll die having fun. And speaking of death, although really good thematic games, Final Girl and Horrified, really truly bring the characters and locations to life, they still are really much about the win. You might be better off with games like Mansions of Madness and Machina Arcana to get a good Lovecraftian, eternal suffering. But enough about the doom and gloom. Forget Gloom of Kilforth, that's just too much gloom. Let's go into something more colorful and heroic. No, I'm not talking about Marvel United or Marvel Champions the card game. Let's keep the heroes out. And I mean, let's keep the heroes out. You are the cutest little monsters running around protecting your dungeon from outside pesky heroes. And that covers my selection of thematic recommendations. Now I can hear you say, but what about this game or that game? Which ones didn't make the cut and why? Many of these games are really highly regarded, and rightfully so. They are excellently designed games, perfectly suitable for solo, but for me they focus a little bit too much on the gameplay and on the strategy forming. Some are very complex, and some are just more about how you play the game, not the experience that you feel enriches you afterwards. And then there were many more that just focused on winning the game, either from your opponents or from the game itself, and didn't focus as much on the journey as I would have liked. But what do you think? Do you agree that some games should be played for the journey and the experience itself? Or am I a complete nutter, and should I just be playing for the win? Tell me in the comments below. And then here are finally my 5 recommendations for best solo thematic journeys in games. Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition is still hands down the best Lovecraftian horror adventure experience that you can wish for. Rich characters, even richer locations, and dreadful events. Top notch in my book. Although Sleeping Gods and Sleeping Gods 2 Distant Skies are much more modern versions of the overland adventuring concept, Seventh Continent still does it best in a solo capacity, mainly because you are controlling one single character as he or she tries to solve her curse and figuring out how to survive on this mysterious continent. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit here and nominate 3 games that I think are excellent thematic solo journeys, and they are Nemesis, Tainted Grail, and Aetherfields, all 3 of which provide a singular, rich, and vibrant experience with so much content to go through. Although equally easily enjoyed with others, on a rainy night playing these story narrative driven games all by yourself is truly a very rewarding experience. And then finally, a tentative recommendation and a future recommendation. The tentative recommendation would be Earthborn Rangers. Although I'm not exactly sure if this game meets all the criteria, it is a game that you can play solo, it is very thematic, and it's not so much about the win, it's very much about the journey. Now the reason that it is tentative is that the mechanics may be a little bit too heavy for you to properly immerse yourself into the thematics. And then finally, up and coming, and so technically does not qualify for this list just yet, is Orange Nebula's Spirit Fire. Without saying too much about it, trust me when I say this is a very thematic, solo, journey-oriented experience that is quite unique in its field. Check it out. And that's it. That's my take on the 2023 People's Choice Top 200 Solo Games, the Culled and Less Thematic Edition. I hope you enjoyed it, and leave a comment in what you agree with and don't agree with, and I hope to see you soon on another Story Tiles Top 1.